All right, so what I'm going to talk to you about is the roots of quadratic functions. And what the roots of functions are, roots are also known as zeros. And that is the solutions where they cross the x-axis. It's like finding your x and y intercept of a linear function. So let's say I have a quadratic function where it crosses the x-axis here at -1, -2, -3, at -4 and 1. This tells me that the function, like just for example, it may not be exactly, it may not be exactly like this, but it's going to look something like this if it was a positive, if it was a positive quadratic function, a being positive, that opened upward, it would look something like this. It would tell me that this is where it crosses the x-axis. That's what the roots of the quadratic function are, or the zeros of the quadratic function. So what I'm going to show you is, one way you can do it is by graphing, but I'm going to show you how to do it by factoring. So we know how to factor quadratic functions, but I'm going to review that just because it doesn't hurt to practice this more. So I'm going to start here. A is the coefficient of our x squared. A is 1. So we're just going to have to worry about here the 35. So our factors of 35 are 1 and 35 and 5 and 7. Because of this negative here, that tells me that these numbers are, one's going to be positive and one's going to be negative. But what I also know is that because of this positive right here, that it has to be positive 7 minus 5, because negative 5 times positive 7 is going to give me the negative 35, but the negative 5 plus 7 gives me positive 2. So this factored out is going to be x minus 5 times x plus 7. Well, I'm not done, because what I now need to do is I need to set each of these, because really you're finding out where it's equal to 0. You want to set the equation or the quadratic equal to 0. So that means if either one of these parts is equal to 0, the whole thing is equal to 0, because 0 times another number is 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, x minus 5 is equal to 0. Well, if I add 5 to both sides of my equation, I get that x is 5. And that makes sense, because 5 minus 5 is 0, right? So that one works out. So this was one of the answers. And then the other one here, I'm going to say x plus 7 is equal to 0. I subtract 7 from both sides, and I get x is negative 7. So that's the other 0 for the function. So if x is negative 7, or x is negative 7 and x is 5, that's when the answer is 0 to the quadratic function. So let's try another one. This one's a little bit trickier. Remember, I've got to multiply the coefficient of my first term and then multiply my last term together. 6 times 6 is 36. So my factors of 36 are 1 and 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. Well, what I want to get here is my sign is positive here. So that tells me that both of these numbers, excuse me, are going to have the same sign. But then I also notice that this number is negative. So that means it's going to be minus minus. Well, minus 4 minus 9 gives me the negative 13 there. So I'm going to write this out. Your first and last term stays the same. So the 6x squared and the 6 are going to stay the same. So I got 6x squared minus 4x minus 9x and then plus 6. I put parentheses around the first and second term and then around the third and fourth term. And now I want to pull out the greatest common factors. So the greatest common factor of 6x squared and 4x is going to be 2x. So I'm going to have 2x times 3x minus 2. And then over here, the greatest common factor of negative 9x and 6 is going to be negative 3x, which is going to be times 3 minus 2. Oops, times 3x minus, no, it's not. Hold on a second. Sorry, let me fix that. It's just negative 3 times 3x minus 2. Now you have to make sure that when you pull out the greatest common factor that you're left with the same thing inside both parentheses. Okay, so when you rewrite this, you end up with 2x minus 3 times 3x minus 2. Because I'm going to take these two terms and combine them together to get the 3x minus 3, and then whatever it was that was duplicated, that becomes the other term, or the other binomial. So now, though, I'm not done because I want to set each of these equal to 0 because, again, this is all equal to 0. That's how we find the roots when we set it equal to 0. So I'm going to say 2x minus 3 is equal to 0. I add 3 to both sides. I get 2x is equal to 3. Divide both sides by 2, so I get x is equal to 3 over 2. I'm going to do the same thing over here. 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. I'm going to add 2 to both sides. 3x is equal to 2. Divide by 3. X is equal to 2/3. So the zeros here are at 3 over 2, or 1.5, and then 2 over 3. Okay? Now let's try another one. Here we have 15 that we want to find the common factors of. And so I've got, or the factors of, and I got 1 and 15 and 3 and 5. Well, I want to get positive 8x here, so that tells me it's going to be positive 3 and positive 5. So this is going to be x plus 3 times x plus 5. So I'm going to set each of these equal to 0. So x plus 3 is equal to 0 and x plus 5 is equal to 0 because this whole thing is equal to 0, right? That would be the zeros. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So that gives me x is equal to negative 3. I'm going to subtract 5 over here. Gives me x is equal to negative 5. So my zeros are at negative 3 and negative 5. Now this one's one of those kind of special circumstances. It may help you to rewrite this as 25x squared minus or plus 0x, however you want to think of it, minus 49. If that helps you, that's fine. But what I want you to realize here is that this is a difference of squares. And so how I'm going to write it is I'm going to write this as 5x squared minus 7 squared. Notice because there's no x in the middle, like we said plus 0x, there's no x in the middle, that this is going to be 5x plus 7 times 5x minus 7. Notice that the signs are different here, and the reason is because we want the middle part to cancel out so that we have this plus 0x here. So here's what we're going to do, and I'm going to show you how it multiplies out, and I think that'll help it make more sense. 5x times 5x is 25x squared. 5x times negative 7 is negative 35x. 7 times 5x is positive 35x. And then 7 times negative 7 is negative 49. So here's what I was saying in the middle, this negative 35x, positive 35x, that all cancels out, leaving us with 25x squared minus 49. So this is kind of a little trick right here. Again, you find out what the squares are, because these are difference of squares. They're both perfect squares. But notice that the signs have to be different. You have to have a positive or a plus and a minus, so that way you can get this middle part right here to cancel out. So, sorry, going back to the whole point. So I'm going to set 5x plus 7 equal to 0, and then I'm going to set 5x minus 7 equal to 0. Still finding my zeros. Subtract 7 from both sides. 5x is equal to negative 7. Divide by 5, so x is equal to negative 7 over 5. Here I'm going to add 7 to both sides, so 5x is equal to 7. Divide both sides by 5, so x is 7 over 5. So my zeros are negative 7 over 5 and positive 7 over 5. The last thing you're ever going to have to do is if I give you the zeros and then I say, okay, what is the quadratic function that represents this solution? You're kind of working backwards. Like here, we start off with our equation, we find out what it is factored, and then we figure out the zeros. Well, we're working the other way. We're going to find, we know the zeros, so now we're going to work towards the factoring and then go back and get the equation. So if one of my zeros is positive 3, that means x minus 3 is what it would factor to, because if I plug in 3 here, 3 minus 3 is 0. So that's how I know that this is x minus 3. And then over here, for the negative 5, this has to be x plus 5. Because if I plug in negative 5 plus 5, I get 0. So it's going to be the opposite sign of what you have, meaning I've got negative here, so this is going to be adding. I've got positive here, so this is going to be subtracting. But I'm not done because I'm asking for the equation. So what we're going to want to do now is we're going to have to actually multiply them out. So x times x is x squared. X times positive 5 is positive 5x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. And negative 3 times 5 is negative 15. I am going to combine like terms. So I have positive 5x minus 3x. So this gives us x squared plus 2x minus 15.